This story is a work of fiction inspired by the title you provided. Queen Camilla's visit to Windsor Castle had been planned for weeks, yet the morning itself felt surprisingly calm. The sun had risen gently over the historic stone walls, casting long golden streaks across the open courtyard. A mild breeze carried the faint scent of early roses from the nearby gardens, making the entire environment feel warm and welcoming. It was the kind of day that made even ordinary moments feel special, and people sensed it the moment they stepped onto the castle grounds. Visitors, families, tourists, local supporters, and camera crews had begun gathering long before the Queen's arrival. Some stood behind the ropes with phones ready, eager to capture even a brief glimpse of her. Others chatted excitedly, sharing stories of previous royal encounters or guessing what she might wear. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, pointing at the huge flag flying above the castle. It was the traditional sign that a member of the royal family was present, and it added an extra layer of excitement to the scene. Near the center of the courtyard stood a line of royal guards. Their bright uniforms, tall bearskin hats, and perfectly still posture created a striking contrast to the lively crowd around them. Tourists whispered about how the guards never moved, never smiled, and never broke character, no matter what happened around them. This quiet discipline fascinated people. Some watched them more closely than the castle itself, waiting to see if they could spot even the smallest blink. Yet, behind all the excitement, the atmosphere remained respectful. Everyone knew this was not just a tourist attraction, it was a royal engagement. And Queen Camilla was here to highlight a series of charitable programs connected to local communities. Her presence was not just ceremonial, it was meaningful. People admired her commitment and her warm, approachable style that often brought comfort and encouragement to those she met. As the clock approached the hour, a subtle shift began in the crowd. Conversations softened, camera lenses pointed forward, and children straightened as though sensing the need for quiet. The sound of footsteps approached from the inner gate, and then she appeared. Queen Camilla, dressed in a soft, elegant outfit that moved slightly with the breeze. She carried no heavy royal aura, only a kind sincerity that made people smile the instant they saw her. She walked at a gentle pace, acknowledging those around her with small waves and friendly nods. There was no rush, no stiffness. She stopped to greet several people near the ropes, speaking kindly to a young girl holding flowers and offering warm words to an elderly couple who had waited since dawn. These natural interactions made her seem less like someone from a distant palace and more like a familiar figure people felt they had known for years. The courtyard felt brighter, as though her presence alone added a soft glow to the morning. Every step she took seemed to draw the crowd in closer. Even the photographers lowered their lenses for a moment, just to observe her without the barrier of equipment. There was something comforting about the way she carried herself, graceful, steady, and gently humorous in her expressions. As she continued her walk, her path gradually brought her closer to the line of royal guards. Their unmoving figures stood like statues against the stone wall. Many in the crowd shifted their attention, whispering with curiosity. People always wondered how the royals felt about the famous guards. Did they admire their discipline, or did they sometimes worry about their comfort during long hours of standing? Queen Camilla seemed particularly aware of them. Even from a distance, she offered them a soft smile. Though she knew they could not react, she understood the level of discipline these guards maintained. The role required unwavering focus, and they took great pride in it. Still, she always appreciated the human effort behind the uniform, and she treated them with quiet respect. As she approached them, the air changed. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was noticeable, a small shift like the moment before a surprise. The crowd leaned in slightly, sensing that something interesting might happen. Queen Camilla often found a way to create gentle, unexpected moments during her engagements, moments that made people feel part of something memorable. She reached the first guard in the row, a tall, composed figure whose expression was completely unreadable. His posture was flawless, shoulders high, chin level, eyes fixed ahead. The sunlight glinted softly on the metal of his buttons, making him look almost like a figure carved from history. Tourists raised their cameras, expecting nothing more than a peaceful snapshot. But something in the Queen's eyes suggested she had a small spark of curiosity or playfulness. She paused in front of the guard, observing him with the same respectful interest she had shown everyone else that morning. A few people near the front gasped quietly, surprised that she had stopped so close to him. Though the guards were always present, royals usually kept interactions formal. A gentle laugh rippled through the crowd when a child whispered loudly, "Will he move?" The child's mother quickly shushed him, but even Queen Camilla heard and smiled softly. She turned her attention back to the guard, giving him a thoughtful, friendly look. She spoke in a quiet voice, one that carried warmth rather than authority. Her words were light, almost playful, just the kind of comment that made people around her feel comfortable and included. The crowd didn't catch every word, but they understood the tone. It was a moment of simple human connection, unexpected, yet perfectly natural in the way she delivered it. She did not say anything commanding or inappropriate, only something kind, friendly, and polite, something that reflected her gentle personality. At that moment, a ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. Tourists leaned closer. Some raised their phones a little higher. Others simply watched with wide eyes, wondering what might happen next. The royal guards had a reputation for remaining absolutely still, and people were fascinated by the idea that even a friendly comment from a queen might not cause so much as a blink. No one expected anything unusual. In fact, most visitors assumed the guard would remain exactly where he was, unchanged and unmoved, just as tradition demanded. That was part of the charm, knowing the guards would not break their discipline for anything, not even a moment of royal humor. And yet, despite this expectation, something about the scene felt different. It wasn't dramatic or tense, it was simply warm, almost delicate, like watching a soft breeze pass through a quiet garden. The Queen's smile, the guards' perfect stillness, the hushed excitement of the crowd, everything blended into a single, unforgettable moment of calm, curiosity, and wonder. What no one knew, not even Queen Camilla herself, was that the most surprising part was still yet to come. The quiet courtyard of Windsor Castle seemed to hold its breath as Queen Camilla stood only a few steps away from the line of royal guards. The soft breeze that had been moving earlier slowed, as if even the wind wanted to observe what was happening. People in the crowd leaned forward with bright, curious eyes, wondering what the Queen might do next and how the guard would respond, if he responded at all. Queen Camilla had always carried a natural warmth with her, and it was that same warmth that made her pause in front of the guard. She had not planned anything. There was no script, no rehearsed action. It was simply one of those spontaneous moments that life creates on its own. A moment shaped by kindness, curiosity, and the gentle charm that often appeared during her public visits. Her eyes moved over the guard's uniform with appreciation. The polished buttons, the neat arrangement of straps, the bright red coat, all of it symbolized dedication and discipline. She admired the way the guards stood for hours with calm patience, offering a silent sense of security and tradition. To her, their presence added richness to royal events, reminding everyone of history and respect. But even with all the formality, she knew there were real people behind those still faces. People who trained, who worked hard, who cared deeply about their duties. She admired that. She always had. The crowd's whispers grew lighter, almost like a soft hum weaving through the air. "Do you think he'll look at her?" someone whispered. Another guest, an older gentleman clutching a walking stick, murmured, "They never move, not even a little." A group of schoolchildren near the front clung to the rope barrier, eyes wide with wonder. One little girl with curly hair whispered excitedly, "Maybe she'll make him smile." Her teacher gently shook her head. "They're trained not to react, dear." But even she couldn't hide a hopeful smile. Queen Camilla listened to these little murmurs without reacting too strongly. She enjoyed seeing people so engaged. It reminded her of how much joy simple moments could bring, even in a place filled with centuries of tradition. She turned slightly, facing the guard more directly. Her voice, gentle and polite, carried just enough for those nearest to hear. She didn't ask anything serious, only a light, friendly comment, meant to bring a touch of warmth to the stiff formality of the moment. It wasn't a command or anything strict, just a soft request, made in good spirit, meant almost like a friendly gesture between two people serving the same institution in different ways. The tourists closest to her exchanged looks of surprise. A few even let out small gasps. They knew how rare it was for anyone, to speak directly to a royal guard while he was on duty, and even rarer still for someone of royal status to do it with such an easygoing tone. Cameras rose like a small forest of hands. Photographers pressed their fingers halfway onto their shutter buttons, ready to capture whatever happened next. Even the official press team, trained to focus on scheduled moments, found themselves drawn to this unexpected pause in the morning's routine. For a moment, everything stood still. The guard remained in perfect posture. His eyes stayed forward. His chin stayed lifted. His boots stayed firmly placed on the stone path. If he felt anything, amusement, surprise, pride, he did not show it. But there was something different in the air, a soft tension, a shared breath held between hundreds of strangers. Queen Camilla stood calmly, waiting with a patient smile. She did not expect anything dramatic. In fact, she expected nothing at all. She knew the guards were professionals who took their duties seriously. She respected that more than anyone. She simply wanted to add a spark of human warmth to a moment that already felt naturally special. The guard's face remained still, almost like it was carved from the same stone as the castle walls. But those closest noticed something tiny, so tiny that some weren't sure they had truly seen it. A faint flicker in his eyes, a gentle softening of his jaw. It was nothing more than the kind of subtle shift that happens when a person focuses more deeply. A few people gasped again, thinking he might break his stillness, but he didn't, not yet. Queen Camilla, perhaps sensing that she had reached the limit of what she could expect without disturbing duty, offered him a grateful nod, even though she knew he wasn't required to acknowledge it. That respectful understanding made the moment feel calm and elegant, like a quiet bridge between tradition and humanity. The spectators admired her gentle approach. Many took photos, capturing her smile and the guard's unwavering focus. Some even felt touched by the simplicity of the gesture. It didn't matter whether anything spectacular happened. The moment itself was charming enough, soft, respectful, and filled with unspoken appreciation. Yet underneath the calm surface, something else was brewing. A small ripple of possibility that no one, not even the Queen, realized was growing. A young boy near the front suddenly tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, look!" He blinked again. The father frowned softly, adjusting his glasses. "It's only natural, son. They blink sometimes." But even he now watched with sharper attention, because there was something in the guard's posture, still perfect, still disciplined, that felt just a little more alive than before. Almost as if the Queen's kind presence had reached him through the layers of tradition he was trained to keep. Queen Camilla stepped slightly to the side, ready to continue her walk. But the crowd wasn't ready to let the moment go. Their eyes darted between her and the guard, waiting to see if anything else might follow. The tension became a gentle excitement, like the feeling before a surprise in a storybook. The Queen glanced once more at the guard before turning away. Her smile grew brighter. touched with a sense of appreciation for the guard's dedication, for the crowd's wonder, and for the sweetness of the moment itself. But just as she began to step forward, something subtle happened that made the closest visitors inhale at the same time. The guard's fingers, resting straight along the seam of his trousers, shifted almost a millimeter. It was nothing large, not enough to break discipline, not enough to alarm anyone official, but enough to be noticed by someone watching closely. A teenager whispered, "Did he move?" Her friend nodded slowly, eyes wide. "I think he did." Queen Camilla paused again, turning her head slightly as if she sensed movement behind her. She didn't speak, but her eyebrows lifted with mild curiosity. The crowd stirred. People felt the bubbling excitement begin to rise. The guard didn't fully react yet, but the gentle shifting of energy around him created the feeling that something unexpected was about to happen. Cameras, already raised, lifted even higher. Children clutched the rope barrier. Adults exchanged thrilled looks. Tour guides froze mid-sentence, and Queen Camilla, unaware of just how memorable this moment would become, took in a soft breath and turned gently back toward the guard. No words were spoken, no commands were given. Nothing loud or dramatic filled the air. Just a silence, a meaningful silence filled with anticipation. The guard still had not broken regulation, but the sense that he might respond in some way, some small, respectful way, began to spread through the crowd like a quiet wave. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming. Not grand, not wild, but surprisingly human. Something no one had expected when the day began. And whatever it was, it would make this simple morning at Windsor Castle remembered by everyone who stood there. The courtyard of Windsor Castle had grown so quiet that even the gentle flutter of a bird's wings could have been heard. Something invisible yet powerful moved through the space. A shared sense of expectation, as though the whole world held its breath. Queen Camilla stood only a few steps away from the royal guard, her expression warm, patient, and gently surprised by how much attention this simple moment had created. The guard remained perfectly still, but there was something in the air, an energy that suggested he was not as untouched by the moment as his training demanded. His duty required him to stay unwavering, to remain a symbol of discipline and tradition. But he was also human, standing in front of a queen who had given him a kind, respectful smile. Even the most disciplined hearts could feel something in such a moment. Queen Camilla did not move closer. She didn't want to cause trouble or interfere with his duty. But she turned her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge him again. The sunlight fell softly across her face, highlighting the kindness in her eyes. She did not expect anything more, yet something inside her sensed that this was no ordinary pause in a royal visit. Something unusual was approaching, though she couldn't explain why. The crowd felt it too. A small girl whispered to her brother, "I think he's going to do something." Her brother shook his head, but his eyes stayed wide. "They never move." Never. A couple near the front exchanged hopeful glances. A tourist slowly lowered his phone, not wanting the sound of a shutter click to break the magic building in the air. Even the castle staff, who had seen countless royal engagements, stood a little straighter, sensing that this moment was different. Queen Camilla's gentle request from earlier lingered between her and the guard like a soft chord of music that hadn't quite finished playing. It was respectful, light-hearted, and made with sincere warmth. She had not asked for anything serious, only a friendly gesture, but the guard's duty was clear. He was not required to respond. Still, something about the atmosphere made it feel possible. The guard's breathing remained steady beneath his uniform. Inside his mind, a quiet struggle formed, duty on one side and simple human kindness on the other. He had trained for years to defend tradition, to hold still even in unexpected situations. But being addressed kindly by the queen herself was something he had never prepared for. And though he was trained to ignore distractions, he could not fully ignore the sincerity in her voice or the respectful appreciation in her eyes. A single thought passed through his mind, brief but powerful. Sometimes tradition is honored not only by stillness, but by respect. The crowd didn't know what he was thinking. They only saw his stillness, strong and unbroken. But those closest to him sensed something different now. A subtle shift, as though he was gathering courage for a choice no one expected. Queen Camilla waited quietly. She felt no impatience, only curiosity. She admired the guard's commitment and did not wish to disturb his responsibility. Yet she sensed that this moment held more meaning than she could understand. Then, very slowly, so slowly that several spectators didn't notice at first, the guard's head tilted upward by the smallest degree. It was not a break in discipline. It was not dramatic. But it was the first clear sign that something extraordinary might happen. A soft gasp spread through the crowd, flowing from one person to another like ripples in calm water. Queen Camilla's eyes softened further. She did not speak. She simply held the moment with quiet grace. The guard's face remained calm, still, and respectful. But inside he felt a quiet strength growing. Not the strength needed to remain still, but the strength needed to create a moment that would live in people's hearts. He did not want to break rules. He wanted to honor the Queen's kindness in a way that was both respectful and meaningful. He breathed in deeply. His fingers tightened just slightly. His boots shifted their weight almost imperceptibly. And then, in one smooth, precise movement, perfectly trained, perfectly controlled, he lifted his hand. The crowd gasped louder this time, though still in respectful awe. His arm rose slowly, gracefully, as if he were lifting not just his hand, but the entire weight of tradition behind it. His hand reached the brim of his tall hat, fingers aligned, posture immaculate. It was a salute, not rushed, not forced, but carried out with pure dignity. A salute given directly to Queen Camilla. The courtyard burst into a wave of emotion, not loud cheers or wild screams, but a warm, heartfelt sound that spread through the people gathered there. It was the breath they had all been holding, finally released. Some people clapped softly, some covered their mouths in shock, some simply stared, frozen with disbelief and excitement. Queen Camilla herself seemed stunned. Her eyes widened, her mouth parted slightly, and then, slowly, a brilliant smile grew across her face. Not a formal, practiced smile, but a genuine one that reflected both surprise and deep appreciation. She placed a hand gently over her heart, acknowledging the gesture with warmth that could be felt even from a distance. For the guard, the moment was as quick as the flash of sunlight reflecting off polished metal. After holding the salute for a respectful beat, he lowered his arm with flawless precision, returning to his exact position. Posture straight and steady. It was as though nothing unusual had happened, except everyone knew something truly meaningful had just taken place. The guard had not disrespected tradition. He had not broken discipline. He had simply offered a small gesture, a symbol of mutual respect between service and royalty. Children clapped. Adults wiped small tears of emotion they hadn't expected to feel. Tourists looked at each other with bright expressions, knowing they had witnessed something rare, something pure, something unforgettable. Queen Camilla nodded to the guard in gratitude. Her voice remained soft, but her eyes shone with genuine respect. She did not speak loudly enough for the crowd to hear. The moment did not need words. The moment was already whole. After a few seconds, she stepped back, allowing the moment to settle naturally. She turned toward the crowd again, her smile still glowing with warmth from the silent exchange she had just shared with the guard. The people applauded gently, keeping the tone polite and respectful. Despite the excitement, no one wanted to disturb the calm dignity of the moment. The guard remained completely still once more, but something had changed, not in his posture or in his expression, but in the way people looked at him. They saw not only a symbol, not only a tradition, but a person with a heart, dedication, and a quiet strength that allowed him to honor both duty and kindness at the same time. The courtyard felt different now, lighter, brighter, as though the air itself carried a soft glow, warmed by a gesture that had taken only seconds yet would be remembered much longer. As Queen Camilla resumed her walk along the rope line, the visitors knew the day had shifted. What had begun as a routine engagement had turned into a story they would carry home, share with friends, and retell for years. The guard stood silently. The queen walked gracefully. But the moment between them lingered, like a soft echo of respect that neither time nor distance could erase. And though the crowd had quieted, inside every heart there remained a gentle thrill, whispering the same thought. They had just witnessed something truly special. The courtyard of Windsor Castle was still glowing with the excitement of the guard's unexpected salute. Even though the moment had lasted only a heartbeat, its warmth lingered like sunlight that continues to shine long after the clouds drift across the sky. People felt changed, lightened, touched, softened by what they had witnessed. It was one of those rare moments that reminded everyone that kindness could live even inside the strictest traditions. Queen Camilla continued her walk at a calm, steady pace. Her smile, though gentle, was brighter than before. She didn't try to hide how moved she had been. The simple gesture had touched her heart in a way she hadn't expected at all. A salute may have been a familiar sight in her life, but not like this. Not one offered freely, quietly, and bravely by someone who had no obligation to respond. She looked out at the crowd, noticing the joy glowing on their faces. People waved to her with renewed enthusiasm. Children bounced excitedly. Elderly visitors held their hands together, smiling with the soft admiration of people who had lived long enough to appreciate small miracles. Tourists whispered to each other in thrilled voices, already turning the moment into a memory they knew they would treasure. As Camilla approached a group of visitors, she paused again, feeling the energy of the moment still thick around her. A little boy at the front of the crowd stared up at her with sparkling eyes. "Ma'am," he said in a shy, tiny voice, "was that salute for you?" His mother gasped softly and tried to apologize, but Camilla waved it off with a warm smile. "Well," she said gently, "I believe it was his way of showing kindness." She leaned forward slightly and added, "And kindness is always a beautiful thing, isn't it?" The boy nodded eagerly, his cheeks glowing with pride at having spoken to her. People smiled at the exchange, feeling even more connected to the queen than before. Her kindness felt real, not rehearsed, not practiced, but natural, as if she simply carried it with her wherever she went. As she moved farther down the rope line, the whispers in the crowd grew soft but excited. "That was incredible," a woman murmured. "I've never seen anything like it," someone else added. "I'm going to remember this forever," another visitor whispered. Several tourists showed each other their photos, checking if they had captured the very second the guard lifted his hand. Some had managed to photograph the exact moment of the salute. Their faces glowed with joy, knowing they had captured something truly rare, not because it was grand, but because it was human. A group of photographers stood to the side, shaking their heads in quiet amazement. They captured hundreds of images each week, but moments like this, unscripted, gentle, unexpected, were the ones that stayed with them long after. One of the official photographers looked at his camera screen and whispered to his colleague, "This one is special." And it was. Meanwhile, the guard had already returned to his stillness. His posture was impeccable again, his gaze fixed forward, his expression as neutral as the stone statues that stood in quiet corners of the castle. But there was something different now, something invisible, but unmistakable. It was as if the gesture he had made moments earlier had left a soft glow around him, though no one could see it with their eyes. He had not broken his duty. He had honored it in a way that connected him to everyone around him, not by abandoning tradition, but by allowing humanity to flow through it. Queen Camilla glanced back once more, almost without meaning to. Her eyes softened again as they met the scene of the guard standing tall, back in position. She knew he would not respond now, and she did not expect him to. But she carried the moment with her, deep inside her heart. A few steps later, she arrived at another small group of visitors, among them a pair of elderly sisters who had traveled a long distance to see her. One of them reached out to her with trembling hands. "Your Majesty," she said in a shaky voice, "we've been coming to Windsor for years, but today was the most beautiful moment we've ever seen here." Queen Camilla placed her hand gently over the woman's, giving her a warm, sincere smile. "I'm glad you were here for it," she said. The woman wiped away a small tear of happiness. It wasn't sadness, just the kind of gentle emotion that comes when something unexpected touches the heart. Many people around them felt similar emotions. Some wiped their eyes quietly, embarrassed but grateful. Others looked at one another with soft laughter that carried relief, surprise, and pure joy. Queen Camilla continued her walk with the same calm grace, but her steps carried a little extra brightness now. The moment with the guard had transformed the atmosphere of the entire event. What had begun as a normal morning had turned into something unforgettable, not because of grandeur, but because of simplicity. After greeting several more visitors, she paused at a special display area set up for the charitable program she was supporting. Tables were decorated with flowers, handmade crafts, and information about community projects. Volunteers stood nearby, waiting nervously yet excitedly to speak to her. "We weren't expecting such a crowd," one volunteer whispered to another. "It's the moment with the guard," the other whispered back. "Everyone's talking about it." Camilla listened to the volunteers speak about their work. She asked questions that showed her interest was real, and she thanked them sincerely for their dedication. They felt seen, appreciated, and uplifted by her attention. As she moved from table to table, people continued to glance back toward the guard who had made the salute. They were not staring out of curiosity anymore. They were looking with admiration, gratitude, and respect. Even though he stood still, he had become the quiet hero of the day. Children whispered things like, "He's so brave. He made the Queen smile. I want to be like him someday." Adults felt the same sense of admiration. They didn't see him as just a symbol of duty anymore. They saw someone who had chosen, for one brief moment, to share something meaningful with everyone present. Queen Camilla eventually stepped aside to speak privately with her staff. They discussed the next part of the schedule, but even her staff seemed slightly distracted, still processing the unexpected moment they had witnessed earlier. "It was very special, wasn't it?" one of them murmured. Camilla nodded softly. "Yes," she said, "it truly was." Her voice carried calm warmth, but her eyes still shimmered with emotion. As she walked toward the exit of the courtyard, ready to move on to the next part of her engagement, the crowd gave her a gentle, respectful round of applause. They weren't cheering loudly. They weren't shouting. They were simply thanking her for being present, for being warm, and for sharing a moment that made them feel connected to something greater than themselves. The guard remained in perfect position, but many people looked at him with a soft smile before turning to leave. They knew he wouldn't react, but their silent appreciation surrounded him like a warm breeze. And though the courtyard slowly returned to its usual calm, the story of the salute was already spreading. A man whispered to his wife, "This is something we'll tell people for years." A teenager told her friend, "I got the whole thing on video." A group of tourists spoke excitedly. already planning how they would describe the experience when they returned home. Queen Camilla stepped away from the courtyard, but inside her heart, the moment stayed alive, bright, warm, unforgettable. The day was not over yet, but the gentle, brave salute from the guard had changed everything. The sun had begun its slow, graceful climb toward the afternoon sky, casting warmer light across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle. The courtyard, which only an hour earlier had been filled with quiet curiosity and growing excitement, now carried a different kind of energy. A soft, glowing memory that hung in the air like a delicate fragrance that refused to fade. People were still talking in gentle voices as they made their way toward the exits. Even though the Queen had already moved on to her next engagement, the memory of the guard's unexpected salute stayed fresh in everyone's mind, as if it had happened only seconds ago. Some visitors stood in small circles, replaying the moment again and again. "He lifted his hand so calmly," one woman whispered, still smiling. "It looked like he wanted to honor her," another added, her eyes bright. "He didn't break tradition," a young man said proudly. "He showed respect in the purest way." The moment wasn't loud, dramatic, or shocking. It was simple, sincere, and filled with quiet emotion. That was what made it unforgettable. Meanwhile, the guard who had made the salute stood in the exact same position as he had before, motionless, focused, his expression calm and unreadable. But though his posture had returned to perfection, his mind carried a peaceful stillness, a sense of inner warmth born from his small gesture of respect. He had not planned to do it. He had not expected to. Yet when Queen Camilla offered him such gentle kindness, his heart had responded on its own. He had acted with sincerity, not for applause, not for attention, but simply because it felt right. And though the crowd had moved on, many visitors looked back at him one last time before leaving. They carried his image with them, not just the way he stood tall and strong, but the moment when he had allowed kindness to rise above formality. He had become part of a story that would be told again and again. A young woman walking beside her husband whispered, "This will be the best memory of our trip." Her husband nodded. It felt like we witnessed history. A child held tightly to her mother's hand. "I'm going to tell my whole class," she said excitedly. Her mother smiled. "They'll be amazed." Farther down the courtyard, Queen Camilla walked quietly with her staff, a serene expression on her face. Although she was now focused on her upcoming meeting, her heart was still gently wrapped around the moment she had shared with the guard. It had touched her more deeply than most would ever know. She paused for a moment, letting a soft breeze brush across her cheeks. In that quiet second, she reflected on how the simplest things often carried the greatest meaning. "It was such a small moment," one of her aides said softly, walking beside her. "But it felt important." Camilla nodded, her smile tender. "Yes," she said. "Sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones we never expect." Her aide looked back toward the courtyard where the guard still stood. "He'll probably never forget it," he murmured. "Nor will I," she replied gently. There was no pride in her voice, no feeling of superiority, just gratitude. A heartfelt gratitude for a gesture that had reminded her of the deep respect shared between the royal family and those who served alongside them. As she continued forward, flashes from camera photographers captured the serene emotion still lingering in her expression. Although she had attended many events throughout the years, this particular morning had woven a thread of memory that would stay with her long after the day was over. Meanwhile, back in the courtyard, something else was happening. A small group of castle staff had quietly gathered just beyond the rope barrier. They had not spoken at the time, not wanting to interrupt the moment, but now, with most of the crowd drifting away, they allowed themselves to express their admiration. "I've never seen that before," one staff member said softly. "Neither have I," another replied. "I've worked here for years." "He showed a lot of courage," a third said with a nod. "And kindness, too." They all glanced at the guard again, knowing he would not respond, but appreciating him even more because of it. The atmosphere in the courtyard began to settle into a calm silence. Birds fluttered across the sky, landing gently on the castle walls. Flowers in the nearby garden swayed lightly in the breeze. The guard stood still, becoming once again a part of the castle's timeless beauty. Yet beneath the surface, a story had taken root, a story that would travel far beyond the castle walls. A group of tourists from abroad gathered near the exit, speaking with energy. "People are going to love hearing about this back home," one of them said. "I can't wait to show the photos," another replied. A teenager excitedly checked her phone. "It's already trending," she said in amazement. She showed her friend a social media post that someone had already uploaded, a photo of the salute, captured at the perfect second. The comments beneath it were filled with warmth and appreciation from people who had not been there but could feel the emotion through the image. The story was spreading quickly, carried by amazed visitors who wanted to share the beauty of what they had seen. Not long after, Queen Camilla reached the next venue inside the castle, a room filled with volunteers, community leaders, and local supporters. But even as she greeted them with her usual grace, many of them were already whispering about what had happened in the courtyard. One volunteer stepped forward and said quietly, "Your Majesty, we heard something very touching happened outside." Camilla gave a gentle nod, her eyes soft. "It did," she said, "a moment of kindness." Her tone was calm yet filled with meaning. She did not need to describe every detail. The warmth in her voice said enough. The volunteers smiled, their hearts swelling with appreciation for both the guard and the Queen. They could feel that something beautiful had taken place that morning, something honest, quiet, and unforgettable. As the event continued, the story spread from room to room, person to person. It traveled with the volunteers as they returned to their tables. It traveled with staff as they moved through the halls. It traveled with the visitors as they left the castle grounds. By the time afternoon arrived, the moment had taken on a life of its own. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't turned into anything grander than it was. People simply shared it as it had been. A small salute, given with sincerity, witnessed by many, and remembered by all. When Queen Camilla finally returned to her car, ready to depart, she paused one last time and looked toward the courtyard. She couldn't see the guard from where she stood, but she felt his presence, not as a figure of duty, but as a person who had offered her a meaningful gesture. She smiled softly and whispered almost to herself, "Thank you." Then she stepped into the car, still carrying that quiet gratitude in her heart. Hours later, as the castle settled into its usual calm, the guard was relieved from his post. Another guard took his place with a respectful nod. The guard who had saluted walked down the corridor, his boots tapping lightly against the stone. He said nothing, but inside he carried a peaceful sense of pride, not loud or boastful, but gentle and steady. He had not acted to be noticed. He had acted out of respect, and knowing that his small gesture had touched so many hearts filled him with warmth. That evening, as visitors shared stories with friends, families gathered around dinner tables, and people across the world saw photos online, the simple moment continued to spread, not as a headline, not as gossip, but as a story about humanity, a story about kindness, a story about the quiet beauty of doing something sincere. And so, what began as a routine royal visit became a memory woven with warmth and meaning, proof that even in the most traditional places, moments of gentle connection could still shine through. A salute, a smile, a shared moment between strangers, and a story that would be remembered long after the sun had set over Windsor Castle.